Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It's March, man, it's March 2nd already. Hard to believe. 2026. Hope everyone's doing good. I hope everyone had a good weekend. Friday, I went out with a friend, a buddy, and we went to go see a really cool local band in Portland called The Worst, and that was fun. They're kind of like a grungy punk band, and I've seen them play a few times, and I always thought they were pretty good, pretty decent. But this past time I saw them, we went to Hey Sailor on Friday. They were, I think, it was definitely the best I'd ever heard them, and I was really impressed. Super cool. Really, I think as a band they've really kind of come into their own. Very cool band. I definitely would see them again. Loud as fuck, but good times. Also, Saturday was really cool. We had our show at Opera House Video with Quantum and Sonic Wallpaper. It was part of the ice sculpturing festival in Belfast. So there was a lot of foot traffic, a lot of people walking around. But then we had a nice little group of people that came through. Some friends that showed up. Really appreciate the support. Ended up being a lot of fun. Some folks that were at the show that came by, and it was at Opera House Video again. I got to thank Dennis Howard for having us do our crazy thing there. It was cool. Some folks that showed up got some good video and some pretty cool pictures of the show, and it's been fun seeing that a lot of that stuff has been getting some good traction. So we played there. I think this was like our third. It was our probably our fourth time as a band playing there, and we've done it in a few different configurations, and this was like our second time doing it with Ronnie. So really cool. Really a lot of fun. A lot of fun. I had a total blast. And then yesterday I just kind of relaxed and chilled out. Reconnected with a friend Saturday night. Went out for some food. Had some beers. It's Sunday. Yesterday I just kind of zoned out and chilled. I've been really getting into photography lately. Well, I've always been into it, but I've been getting more and more into it as of late. Started last year. I started getting a little bit more, I've used the word, but a little bit more serious and a little more proactive with taking photos and trying to, dial some things in around some of the photos that I've taken. And that's been a lot of fun. Kind of a, I don't know, kind of a new weird little side hobby. It's kind of been, I guess photography's kind of been in my life for a long time because my dad used to be a professional photographer, so I was always around photography as far as nice cameras. I mean, I don't everything I do around photography, and I'm not saying I'm a photographer at all, but is super low tech. I got a pretty nice phone that takes pretty nice photos, so I've been just taking always I'm always taking photos at different places or things that really pop into my eye or into my vision that look really interesting or cool. And I've been just like working on doing that, here and there, taking some photos, and then I've been experimenting with using different, effects on the photos themselves. I don't use any AI stuff. I just use, some different color schemes and just kind of messing around. It's a lot of fun. But my all growing up as a kid, my dad retired when I was in high school, about ninth or it's about tenth or 11th grade. He kind of retired, but for years he was a professional photographer. So he made his living doing photography, mostly like commercial shoots. He growing up, he always did shoots, mostly commercial shoots for like weddings and things like that. So as a kid, I remember him always like traveling around a lot to do lots of weddings and things like that. He also did portraits and a few like side things, but it was mainly as a commercial photographer for like weddings. And he did that kind of work for a long time. And growing up as a kid, he had his uh, studio in the downstairs of our house, where he had all his cameras and different things set up, and people would come over to do shoots there. So I don't know, photography was always around, and I always had interest in it, you know. So I don't know, it's interesting. And you know, I don't know, there's a lineage too with my favorite director of all time, Stanley Kubrick. He started out as a photographer, so I've always been really interested in the medium to some degree, and it's just kind of a you know a little, very little, small little side hobby I've been getting into, and it kind of all, I guess it all like, it's all obviously very very related. But getting back to the topic at hand, I want to thank people who have been commenting. Got some been getting some new subscribers here on the channel. It's been really really fun. I will be away for a few days coming up later this week, so I will be away from my computer, so I won't be doing any videos for a little bit of a break. But there's plenty of shit out up on the channel to look at. So, but yeah, again, I want to thank people who've been supporting this whole crazy thing that I do. I've been totally into taking these deep dive videos. It's been a super fun adventure. It started, the first one I did, which was like a deep dive video, was The Howling, my favorite werewolf movie. And so lately, I've been, well, lately I'm been for the last like almost 2 weeks been totally overdosing on all things Friday the 13th. Every year I go through a cycle where I will watch the Friday the 13th movies. And it's been almost 2 weeks. I'm on the very last movie in the entire franchise. I actually, this is also a little bit of a different thing because I more or less watch the movies out of order. There's probably three or four from about part four to about, it was basically through the final chapter through Jason Takes Manhattan. Watched them in order, but since then it's been kind of out of order. And they're great. Even, it's a huge franchise. There's a ton of movies. There's also, you have the franchise itself, and then you have these side spin off movies, like Jason X, or even the reboot that came out in 2009, which I just finished that video. I did a deep dive on that movie. All of these movies I've talked about before, but I like the concept, the idea of taking a deeper dive and exploring the movies a little bit more. So that's what I've been doing. Been diving pretty deeply into a lot of the special features that are on my discs. So today's show is on, I don't know, it's a tough call, but I've always said my favorite in the franchise is the final chapter, part four. And it still pretty much is, but I have to say I go back and forth because I think this movie is just so incredible, and just, it's probably the most gonzo of all of the movies, and that is Jason Goes to Hell. So I'm going to do like a deep dive video about this movie. I have talked about this movie before, but I'm going to try to do, maybe bring a few new things to the table, take it a little bit further. And every time I watch this movie, I only have this on DVD, but this is a really great copy. This movie is just so absolutely incredible. Kane Hodder plays Jason in this film. He's played, Kane Hodder has a really unique place in history when it comes to Friday the 13th, because he's the only actor that's come back multiple times to play Jason. And I don't know, when I grew up, I always liked the Kane Hodder movies, but I always gravitated towards the older ones with, like Ted White and Richard Roker and those things. But these movies have grown for me over time, especially Jason Goes to Hell. I almost think that this might be my favorite in the franchise. It's just so fucking crazy. It's so over the top. There's actually two cuts of the movie too, which I didn't realize on here. There's a unedited version, and then there is like a regular theatrical version, or I should say a rated version and a unrated version. And again, it's kind of like picking you know such a subtle difference, a difference of maybe like I believe the two cuts. There's a difference in time of like 6 minutes or something like that. Which if you're a hardcore fan of any movie, especially when it comes to Friday, I think I think it totally is worth it. Absolutely worth it. I think it's subtle. The and I think in the past the last review that I did for Jason Goes to Hell, I do believe I can't remember if it was the unrated version or not. But again, when I watched this, I finished this. I actually watched this last night. This is a movie I've seen so many times. I definitely need an upgrade of this because it's so great. The Friday movies that I have on VHS, or I should VHS DVD. I'm trying to think what I have here. Well, Jason Goes to Hell. This is DVD. Freddy vs. Jason, which is DVD. This is the Jason Voorhees documentary, which is the documentary itself sucks, but it has so many great. It's got this bonus special features component where they interview every actor who's played Jason Voorhees, which is super awesome. I've watched that part alone a billion times. So I got these, and then also, which I'm watching now, and I just started. It's the last movie I'm actually watching for the whole duration of Friday 13th Mayhem is Jason X, and I have that on DVD. The rest of the movies I have on Blu-ray, and I reviewed this, and I did a show for this, set this up as premiere. The last one, the last Friday movie in the series that came out in 2009, I have this on Blu-ray. So it's funny going back and forth between Blu-ray, DVD. There's definitely a difference, but I will say the transfer of these movies, even though they're DVD, is still really good. I definitely need to get an upgrade of them, especially Jason Goes to Hell. I really think I almost even though when I compare say when I compare franchises, and then consistency movies that are just in a franchise where movies are they're all just I think really great, consistent, and just a lot of fun. And like a big thing that I'm all about is a movie having legs of its own, so it's its own thing, and you don't necessarily have to watch a movie, to you don't need to know the entire, or should say, you should be able to watch a movie at a standalone speed, where you should be able to go into a cold and it should be its own thing. Yeah, obviously with franchises, it's good to know the backstory, but I really feel like, a movie should be a good movie, a good experience. You shouldn't have to know the entire mythology, the entire lore around, what is, or all things that came before. Obviously, it helps, of course, but and I think the consistency of Friday the 13th franchise is pretty killer, pretty stellar. I always forget how they the first it was Paramount Pictures that put out the original films, and then later on New Line Cinema bought the rights, and then they did the later films. I really think they really did a good job with mixing things up, taking the character of Jason Voorhees, as well as introducing new characters and doing some pretty wacky things, pretty creative things, taking you for a ride, giving you some new surprises, putting Jason in some very unique situations. You know, when you think of the premise of Jason Goes to Hell, Jason Takes Manhattan, and especially Jason X, you know, where he's in space. You know, there's some pretty wacky and unique places where the story goes. And I think it's really great that they did take some creative chances and risks. I kind of always, I don't know, when I watch all of the movies together like I do, and it's one of those things where I get totally, I mean, I'm pretty much an obsessive kind of compulsive person as it is, but when it comes to these movies, I can never just throw one movie in and be like, okay, I'm just going to watch, say, part four. I will have to watch all of them, every movie. I get totally obsessed and get totally pulled down the rabbit hole of Jason Voorhees. And so that's what's happened. It all actually, this whole thing started again about 2 weeks ago when I went with some friends to see Friday 13th Part 3 in 3D, which was amazing. And that kind of kicked off the whole thing. And I do this every year. At least once a year, I'll sit through all the movies all over again. And I do think, you know, what I was starting to say, I feel almost to a point of saying that I almost feel like Jason Goes to Hell is probably the kind of the most in this. I think in the entire series of all of the Friday movies is the most crazy, the most gonzo, the most daring movie in the entire franchise. And I think it it might be the goriest when it comes to the gore factor and the practical effects. I love that this movie is just so fucking entertaining and it's so over the top. And I see, you know, watching it again last night, I see a lot of different influences in it that were thrown in. It's like a big stew of horror. And I see lots of other influences from other genres in horror that are not strictly slasher, for instance. I see a big influence from a lot of zombie movies in Jason Goes to Hell. There's a few sequences that really reminded me of that. There was another influence that I thought was really interesting that I hadn't really picked up on. The other thing that was really interesting, which I never thought about watching, you know, like I said, watching Jason Goes to Hell last night, there was definitely like a zombie influence, like a George Romero, even Italian, like maybe a Lucio Fulci influence. One of the other things that I thought was pretty wild, which I never thought before of, was I felt one of the sequences, especially where Jason's character charges into a police station, it totally reminded me of the first Terminator. I was like, huh, okay. I never picked up on it, and I'm like, that definitely. I I was like, that's gotta have that movie. James Cameron's Terminator must have had a big influence on this film. It's I was like, that's really cool. I never picked up on that before. So, you know, there's that legendary scene in Terminator where Arnold, you know, goes into this police station and just, you know, destroys everyone. And I was like, huh, okay, cool. I never picked up on that before as a thing for Jason Goes to Hell. But I think this movie, I love, like, even though I will say, like, the movie is so over the top and gone so crazy, I think the set pieces, the action in this film, again, getting back to the police station scene, that scene I think is absolutely stunning, even on it from a technical level. I love when Jason's character is just approaching the police station, but when he goes in, everything slows down. Everything is shot in this almost slow motion technique, and it's really cool. Like, I love that you can see all of the action. The violence is so fucking over the top. And I think this movie really has a heavy dose of exploitation thrown into it because it's just so, and it feels like a B movie. It has, I think, because of what I feel like I saw as an influence of Terminator, it has a horror and a supernatural and a sci-fi influence, which I didn't really pick up on before. But it's so over the top, and it really feels. I mean, yeah, all of the Friday movies are all exploitation movies, but this movie has an extra kind of a campy exploitation vibe to it, and it's so entertaining. I love the whole idea of Jason being this like kind of organism that can, transfer itself from body to body, and it gets into, this idea of almost like possession, and it's just so gonzo and crazy. And I think in the series, for the series, out of all of the movies in the franchise, I think this one is probably, I have to say, the most wildly imaginative and the most over the top one, and the sheer creativity is astounding. I did not trying to think when I first saw this movie, man. For some reason, I don't think I actually saw this film, Jason Goes to Hell, and this was supposed to be the final, which it was at the time. This, of course, was the movie that came before, and it was a setup, acted as like a setup film for the big Freddy versus Jason film. It came out in '93, and I can't really remember. I was in high school when this came out, and I can't remember if I had seen it even in that time frame. I know I didn't see it in the theater. I think I didn't get a chance to see this movie for quite a few years later, which is really odd. And I remember like seeing this movie once, and I was like, it was good. I liked it, but it wasn't until maybe even in college or in my 20s or maybe even after college where I revisited this movie, Jason Goes to Hell, and and fast forward 2,000 years later, I think this movie has aged so well for me, and has really been that, that good bottle of wine. It's just aged with pure perfection. And I just think this movie is such a fucking masterpiece. I really do. Every time I watch this movie now, I'm always like, "Yep, this is it. This movie is the shit. This takes the golden prize." I started making the analogy of where I almost think that this is kind of like equivalent. Jason Goes to Hell is kind of equivalent to Halloween Part 3 Season of the Witch, because just because of how it really goes outside of the box and just kind of reinvents the story in some ways, and really takes the whole thing into completely new territory. That being said, I think in comparison, comparing the two franchises, Halloween and Friday 13th, which, again, Halloween is a huge thing for me. I do overall think, for me, Season of the Witch Part 3 for Halloween is my favorite movie. I think that movie is just amazing. Of course, I love the first movie so very, very much. I don't think, and there are some really good movies in the franchise. H2O is actually really, really good. There's a couple other ones that are okay, but then there's some really bad ones. I don't think, in comparison, I think Friday the 13th, as far as like the sheer quality and consistency of all of the movies, blows Halloween out of the water. I think there's way more consistency. Again, like I can't just watch one. When I watch a Friday the 13th movie, I kind of like turn into a crackhead. I can never get enough. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen with any of the other movies and really any other franchise. Like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise, the Halloween franchise. I do need to really revisit the Nightmare on Elm Street films. I don't really have any shows. I am a big fan of that series, but I don't really have many of those movies, which is weird because I grew up watching those movies and I do love them. Child's Play is another franchise that I like a lot too. I think there's not always that consistency either, but for me, Friday the 13th does it for me every time. Does it for me every time. Like with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, there's a few movies in the franchise I absolutely adore, and they're masterpieces. But with that, like I can throw in, like if I'm in a mood, say for the remake, the one that came out, or kind of the reboot that I actually really love, the one that came out in like the 2000s. I can watch that pretty much and just be good after that, or watch the original masterpiece, or the second one. I don't get that weird bug if I throw in one Texas movie, I gotta like watch every fucking movie that there is. I never do that. The same thing with Halloween. That never happens. But with Friday, it's like all guns blazing. If I put one of those movies in, it's like, okay, I gotta watch every fucking movie that was ever that's attached to the entire franchise. It's pretty hilarious. Pizzowell, who is a really awesome YouTube guy, is he's a YouTube guy who is one of my favorites, and he is everything he does, all things horror, all things horror. So he's a when it comes to Friday 13th, he's such a fanatic and just next level. And I've watched a few of his shows on Friday 13th, and it's like really awesome and inspiring. He did a really he does these every now and then he'll do interviews. He's had some really incredible guests on his show. One of the best ones, probably my favorite interview he ever had. He had Bill Luswig on there as a guest, which I was like, holy shit, Bill Luswig's a god in the world of horror exploitation. The Maniac Cop movies, Maniac, uh, the founder of Blue Underground, one of the best boutique labels out there. He had him on there, but he also had the director of Jason Goes to Hell. He had Adam Marcus as a guest, and I have to say it's a long interview. I watched it. I think it was last year or the year before. It was one of the most interesting interviews I've seen because he really talked about kind of the creative process, but just wanted to like really kind of swing for the fences and take some risks, take some chances. And it's a pretty in-depth interview, but very cool. Pizzowell, he's great. I gotta start tagging him in some of these videos because he's great. His YouTube channel. I love his whole personality. He has his brother on the show, which is just great taste in movies. And he is out of the YouTube people and YouTube guys and girls that I do watch fairly regularly. He is definitely the most fanatical when it comes to all things Friday the 13th. I mean, kind of next level. But Adam Marcus really, again, an incredible director. What an awesome job that he did for this film. I mean, really, again, taking some seriously crazy risks and chances, but giving you something really new in the genre because it needs that. Every genre franchise needs you need somebody to kind of like push it along or to like maybe even to the point of where you take it to an extreme place of where everything is kind of established, say in a particular world or the lore an overall storyline, and lots of movies are involved with it. But then you might come to this place of where a director might come along and they're like, well, we're going to just take a hatchet to everything and just destroy it all, but then create something new. Sometimes that will work too. But I think Jason Goes to Hell is definitely the most like it's definitely the most ambitious, and I think not all the time when filmmakers do that really swing for the fence, especially taking a risk where you're taking kind of an iconic established character or story like Friday 13th and really just going crazy, just like let's go for it, let's kind of reinvent the wheel or really shake fucking things up, and I really feel like that's what they did. That's really what he did with this movie. Adam Marcus, again, that interview that I mentioned that was on Pizzlewell, the great YouTube channel, great horror YouTube channel. That interview was, I remember, I think it was only from a few years ago. It was fairly recent. And Adam Marcus, the director, really prolific career. Jason Goes to Hell, 93. Another film he did called Conspiracy in 2008. Secret Santa in 2017. Also Momentum in 2015. So he's worked, I mean, he's still an active director. Let It Snow in 2001. Hearts of Darkness. He did, which actually I have not seen this movie. Quite a few of these movies I haven't seen, but I heard that this movie was actually not very good at all, but I kind of want to see it anyway because I like him as a director so much. He did the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie in 2013 that was in 3D, but I have never seen it. I do need to see it now. Nerd Girls, The Many Lives of Jason, The Once and Future Smash in 2022. Really cool director. I just think like his use of the camera work, the story is so interesting, and I love that it's just so gonzo. I ran into on Saturday at Opera House Video at our gig on Saturday. I ran into some friends that came out and we were talking about horror movies, and we started talking about Friday 13th. And it was in a video store, and one of the guys that was there grabbed we started talking about the Friday 13th movies, and I was like, yeah, I've been knee deep in it, in the just overdosing on all the movies again. And one of the guys, one of their friends had a DVD copy of Jason Goes to Hell, and we were standing around talking about just how fucking crazy this movie is. So, and I was like, it made me excited to watch it again. I was just like, I can't wait to watch it. And I kind of watched, that was something that's been unique watching it this time around. Because usually what I do every year, again, this is a franchise I watch every year. But typically what I do is I watch them in order. I will start with the very first Friday and go all the way. Even with the kind of the side or spin-off movies, I will watch them in order too. This time I just kind of randomly started them kind of in the middle. I watched four together as far as consistently in their timeline or time frame. But other than that, I was just randomly going through them all. And the last one, which I'm on now, which I'll probably finish tonight, is Jason X. So yeah, super fun, super fun. And I think the cast is really, really great for Jason Goes to Hell. I mean, we have Marcus. Adam Marcus is actually in the film itself, which is great. He plays one of the cops. We have Carrie Keegan, and of course Kane Hodder playing Jason again. Dean Lorry, and also Stephen Williams, who is, oh my God, the Duke. He has got to be, his character in Jason Goes to Hell is like, he kind of makes the movie. He kind of steals the show. The other thing about Jason Goes to Hell, it's got some. I do think it's a combination of like this movie being the craziest movie that there is, the most gonzo, the most outside the box, and I think it's got to be the goriest. It's the most brutal. It's got the most brutal kills, I think, in it. Definitely, it's so over the top. But I also think this movie is the funniest. Like it legitimately has some comedy and comedic situations that happen in this movie that are just like really funny, like kind of piss your pants, laughing, stuff that is just amazing, amazing. The one interesting too about, I think, from the visual element, and again, it would make a big, again, it would be that same experience where if I got this movie on Blu-ray, it would probably be like watching it all over again for the very first time. Even though I've played this DVD, I've seen it so many times. It reaches, when I get into a movie and it reaches a point of like, okay, I see it maybe when it comes out, or I see it a few years after, or maybe it's a movie that I missed entirely and I see it years later. If it's a movie that I end up, going full bore where I'll, watch it numerous times, it will usually start with like, maybe 3 or 4 views of the movie. And then I'll probably, if I see or find myself, again, it's tied in a lot with Opera House Video. If I find a movie that way, and I'll, end up watching it a couple times. So and if I find that if that's the case, then I'll probably end up buying it. In my travels, like if I'm at Bull Moose, or what have you. Which I got to get up. I got to get up there. I haven't been up there in a while. Been still buying movies, but not as many as I like. But anyway, when it gets to the point of I've seen a movie 3 or 4 times, whether I've like, many many examples of that with like going to Opera House Video and renting movies there. I'll be at that point of where I'll probably buy it, and then when I buy it, whether I buy it like really secondhand, like a cheaper DVD version, like this movie was, I can't even remember where. I think I actually got this copy of Jason Goes to Hell. I've had this copy of this movie for years and years and years, a long time. I think I got it many years ago at Goodwill in Belfast. But I've essentially like played this movie. It's reached a point where I can't say how many times I've actually seen it. It's beyond easily beyond 20, 30 times probably. And I know, if I got this on Blu-ray, it would be amazing and a whole new experience. Because I just saw actually on Pizzawell's page, his YouTube channel, he did two reviews fairly recently. He's a big Blu-ray, but he's a real big 4K guy, and I haven't made the leap into the 4K world. At some point, I probably will, but I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence. I'm really happy as a collector, as a movie fan. I'm really really happy with great quality Blu-rays. I'm totally happy with that. But I know if I got the upgrade, it would be a whole new experience. But Pizzawell, the YouTube guy who I think is awesome, he did two fairly recent shows on Jason X and also Jason Goes to Hell, I believe, that were released on 4K, and the I guess the transfer both of those films on 4K is just like kind of jaw dropping, packed with special features. There's barely any. There's a commentary track on here, but there's not really much in way of special features on this disc, unfortunately. But the quality's pretty good. And again, I've owned this. I've had this DVD copy for so long that probably 10 years. The thing that's interesting, and I know again my perspective would change around probably this thing when I got it on Blu-ray. But the interesting thing is, I really see the kind of transition of kind of like the production value a little bit around this movie. And again, it started out, as the whole all of the original films, they were all backed by Paramount Studios, and then New Line Cinema actually, eventually bought the rights and then released the rest of the films. And it's funny, it's kind of an odd thing because all of the Friday movies are, essentially, well, they're all slasher movies. They're all slasher movies. They're all exploitation movies, and they're all like pretty damn low budget. And I think with the last movie that came out in the franchise, it's a great balance because it's obviously a bigger production value behind it, but yet it still has that grittiness that you want and that I love, the gritty factor from exploitation. It's a great combination of all of those things. It's not too glossy. It's got a big production value, but it's still nitty gritty and dirty and sleazy. And I think the thing that's kind of odd, but then it's got this other thing of where I'm like, wow, like the effects are absolutely incredible. On one hand, the production value is through the roof. That transition from Paramount to New Line Cinema, like watching this movie, and in some ways, like the way the music is, the way the production seems to be, it feels like it's much more lower budget. Like it almost feels the movies that Paramount were, that I put, Paramount had a bigger, uh, I don't know, like it felt like the production value was a little bit higher on the first few movies as opposed to these. Like when you watch this movie, it feels like it's really cheaply done. And all things considered, all of the movies were, but this feels like it's even like it had less money involved for Jason Goes to Hell. And it's a weird transition between Paramount and New Line Cinema because New Line Cinema is a massive, company. They've released some mega movies. But when it comes to kind of the special effects of this movie, they're just absolutely incredible, and they're all practical effects, and it really has this kind of high production value within this really really low production value. So it's an interesting I don't know, tonal shift, if you will. But yeah, I mean, I can never stop talking about this movie. This movie is a total fucking masterpiece. Definitely need to get this on Blu-ray at some point. It's just amazing. So thanks again. This concludes the deep dive for Jason Goes to Hell. Peace.